The vast emptiness of space stretched before the human exploration vessel Pathfinder as it dropped out of faster-than-light travel. Captain Alan James stood at the bridge's main viewport, his experienced eyes scanning the dying solar system before them. This was the fourth system they had surveyed this month, but something felt different about this one. "Life signs detected on the third planet, sir," reported Officer Tom from his station. His voice carried an unusual tone of surprise. "But they're unlike anything we've seen before." The planet that filled their view was a dim, greenish-brown sphere. Its star, once like Earth's sun, was now a fading red giant that cast weak light across its remaining worlds. According to their readings, this star had perhaps a few hundred years left before it would expand and consume its inner planets. "Take us into orbit," Captain James ordered. "Full sensor sweep." As the Pathfinder moved closer, their instruments revealed something remarkable. The entire planet was covered in what appeared to be a living carpet of moss-like vegetation. More surprisingly, their sensors detected artificial structures, cities and buildings that seemed to grow directly from the living surface. "Captain," Officer Tom called out again, "we're receiving a transmission. It's in galactic standard." This was unexpected. The system wasn't marked on any of their charts, and no advanced civilization should have been here. James nodded, and the communication screen lit up. What they saw stunned the bridge crew into silence. The being on the screen was unlike any alien they had encountered. It appeared to be a humanoid figure, but its entire body was composed of fine, grass-like strands that swayed gently, even in the artificial environment. Two glowing spots of bioluminescence served as eyes. "Greetings, spacefaring vessel," the being spoke in careful galactic standard. "I am Elder Root of the Moss People. We did not expect anyone to come here." James stepped forward. "I am Captain Alan James of the Earth exploration vessel Pathfinder. We're conducting the survey of this sector." "Earth." Elder Root's bioluminescent eyes brightened slightly. "We have heard tales of your species, the young ones who reached the stars recently." Over the next hour, Elder Root shared their story. The Moss People had once been part of the galactic community, but centuries ago, when their star began to die, the Galactic Council had deemed them unworthy of the massive resources needed for relocation or stellar engineering. Their biology was considered too specialized, their technology too focused on botanical rather than mechanical advancement. One by one, the advanced species had abandoned them to their fate. "We have adapted as best we could," Elder Root explained, his voice carrying no bitterness, only a quiet acceptance. "Our bodies evolved to maximize the use of the failing light. We survive, though each generation sees our numbers decline." Captain James felt a familiar anger building in his chest. Humanity had faced its own share of dismissal from the older species when they first reached the stars. They had been called too young, too emotional, too unpredictable. But they had proved them wrong, time and again. "Elder Root," James said, his decision already made, "would you be willing to receive a diplomatic team? I believe Earth would be very interested in opening relations with your people." The moss person's gentle swaying stopped for a moment. "You would wish to speak with us, even knowing our star dies." "Especially because of that," James replied firmly. "Humanity has some experience with impossible situations, and we've learned that the best way to face them is together." For the first time, Elder Root's bioluminescent eyes showed what could only be described as hope. "We would welcome your diplomats, Captain James. Perhaps we are not yet left behind after all." As James sent the first of many transmissions back to Earth about their discovery, he looked again at the dying star. Humanity had faced its own near-extinction events before reaching the stars. They had learned the hard way that survival often depended on helping each other. Now, they had a chance to extend that helping hand to another species that the galaxy had deemed unworthy. The real work was just beginning. 3 days after the Pathfinder's discovery, the human science vessel Horizon arrived in orbit around the Moss People's world. Dr. Lisa Thompson stood in the ship's main laboratory, carefully studying the readings from their advanced sensors. What she saw both amazed and worried her. Their entire civilization is literally part of their planet's biosphere, she explained to the gathered team of scientists. It's unlike anything we've ever seen before. The laboratory walls displayed huge screens showing microscopic views of moss people tissue samples freely given by their hosts. The creatures were a perfect blend of plant and animal characteristics, with cells that could perform both photosynthesis and complex thought. The problem is worse than we first thought, said Dr. Mike, the team's stellar physicist. He pointed to a graph showing the star's output. Their sun isn't just dying. It's dying faster than previous estimates suggested. They have maybe 100 years, not hundreds. Down on the surface, human scientists in environmental suits walked among the living cities of the moss people. These weren't buildings in the traditional sense. They were grown, shaped over decades through careful cultivation. The walls were alive, breathing, and could repair themselves. Elder Root led the human team through what they called the Knowledge Garden, where their historical records grew in patterns of specially cultivated moss. We once shared our biological engineering skills with many worlds, he explained. Our people helped create gardens on space stations and terraform hostile planets. But when our star began to die, those same worlds decided we were no longer useful. Dr. Thompson carefully recorded everything. The moss people's knowledge of biological engineering far surpassed anything humanity had achieved. Their ability to manipulate living matter at a cellular level could revolutionize medicine and agriculture across human space. Your people were wrong to abandon this technology, she told Elder Root. This isn't primitive. It's just different from mechanical engineering. And in many ways, it's far more advanced. Back on the horizon, the assessment team made another surprising discovery. Officer Ben, reviewing old Galactic Council records, found something disturbing. According to this, they didn't just abandon the moss people, they actively discouraged other species from helping them. The reason given in the records was cold and clinical. Species shows insufficient adaptability. Resources required for relocation would be better invested in more evolutionarily dynamic civilizations. Dr. Thompson felt her hands curl into fists as she read the report. The Galactic Council had essentially sentenced an entire species to death because they didn't fit their definition of progress. But as she studied more of the moss people's biology, she began to see something the Council had missed. Their specialized biology wasn't a weakness. It was their greatest strength. The moss people could survive on incredibly low levels of light. They could repair damage to their living structures almost instantly. They could grow food from almost nothing. They're not dying because they're weak, she announced to the team during their evening briefing. They're dying because their star is failing. If we could solve that one problem, they could thrive anywhere. She brought up a display showing the complex light processing structures in their cells. Look at this. They're actually more efficient at using light than any other known species. They've adapted perfectly to their dying star. That's not stagnation. That's incredible evolution. The assessment team worked through the night, compiling their report for Earth. They documented everything. The moss people's advanced biological engineering, their efficient energy usage, their peaceful nature, and their incredible resilience. As Dr. Thompson finished her final report, she added a personal note. The Galactic Council saw a dying species. I see a species that refused to die, that adapted to survive in conditions that would kill most other life forms. They don't need saving. They need a chance to show the galaxy what they can do. She sent the report, knowing it would take weeks for Earth to respond. But as she looked out at the glowing cities below, she already knew what humanity's answer would be. After all, humans had a long history of proving others wrong about what was possible. The United Earth Council chamber was packed with representatives from every human colony. The massive room, usually filled with the quiet buzz of political discussion, now hummed with intense debate. At the center of the chamber, Admiral Grace Wilson stood before the council, presenting the case for helping the Moss people. "The cost will be enormous," argued Representative Smith from Mars Colony. "We're talking about redirecting resources that could build 10 new colony ships." Admiral Wilson nodded calmly. She had expected this argument. With a gesture, she brought up a hologram showing Earth as it had been a century ago, choked with pollution and dying oceans. 50 years ago, when we faced our own environmental crisis, many said saving Earth was too expensive. She paused, letting the image sink in, but other humans didn't abandon us. Every colony pooled their resources. Together, we saved our homeworld. The chamber grew quieter as memories of that crisis surfaced. Many of the older representatives had lived through those dark days. "The Moss people aren't asking us to save them," Wilson continued. "They've survived for centuries on their dying world. They're still developing new ways to adapt. All they need is a chance." The next speaker was Dr. Thompson, recently returned from the assessment mission. She showed recordings of the Moss people's living cities and their incredible biological technology. "Look at what they've achieved with almost no resources," she said, pointing to data showing their energy efficiency. "Their biological engineering could revolutionize our own colony programs. They can grow buildings that repair themselves. They can create food from minimal light and basic minerals." A quiet murmur spread through the chamber as the implications sank in. The Moss people's technology could solve many problems facing human expansion. But it was the next presentation that changed everything. Elder Root himself appeared via hologram, his gentle movements captivating the chamber. He showed the council his people's historical records, centuries of being rejected by advanced species, yet continuing to develop and adapt. "We do not ask for charity," Elder Root said softly. "We ask for partnership. Together, we believe we can create something new." The council session stretched into its second day. The debate raged on about costs, risks, and responsibilities. Some argued that humanity was too young a spacefaring species to take on such a massive project. Others worried about antagonizing the Galactic Council. Then Representative John, one of the oldest members, stood up. The chamber fell silent. He rarely spoke at sessions. "When I was a boy," he began, his voice carrying across the quiet room, "my grandmother told me stories about when humans first reached space. Every advanced species we met told us we were too primitive, too emotional, too unstable. They said we would never succeed." He walked to the center of the chamber, his steps slow but determined. "But we didn't listen. We proved them wrong. And now we have a chance to help another species do the same." The mood in the chamber shifted. More representatives began sharing stories of human persistence against overwhelming odds. Stories of colonies surviving impossible conditions, of communities coming together to overcome disasters. Admiral Wilson watched as the momentum built. This was humanity at its best, not the logical, cold efficiency the Galactic Council prized, but the emotional, determined spirit that had taken humans from a single planet to the stars. The final vote wasn't even close. Earth would help the Moss people. As the council session ended, Admiral Wilson received an urgent message. The Galactic Council had learned of their plans. They were sending representatives to discuss the situation. Wilson smiled as she read the message. Let them come. Humanity had made its decision. They would show the galaxy that sometimes the species labeled as weak or primitive could surprise everyone. She looked at the project proposals already flooding in from human scientists and engineers. Some suggested massive solar collectors. Others proposed artificial light arrays. The most ambitious wanted to stabilize the dying star itself. It wouldn't be easy, but humans had never let that stop them before. Commander Mark Stone watched from the observation deck as another massive construction ship dropped out of faster-than-light travel. This was the 20th vessel to arrive this week, each carrying pieces of what would become the largest solar amplification system ever built. Looks like the Galactic Council's observers have arrived, Officer Pete said, pointing to a sleek silver ship approaching the construction zone. Stone nodded. The advanced species had sent their observers to watch what they called humanity's grand waste of resources. But he knew they were really here to witness what they expected to be a spectacular failure. "Let them watch," he said, turning back to the holographic construction plans. The design was ambitious, a network of enormous solar collectors that would gather, amplify, and focus the dying star's light onto the Moss People's planet. Below, on the planet's surface, the scene was equally busy. The Moss People weren't sitting idle while humans worked to save their world. They had begun teaching human scientists their biological engineering secrets. In one of the living laboratories, Dr. Thompson worked alongside Elder Bloom, watching in amazement as he demonstrated how to grow solar-collecting tissues. "Our ancestors developed these when the star first began to dim," Elder Bloom explained. "They capture and store even the weakest light." The human scientists were stunned. The Moss People's natural solar collectors were far more efficient than anything humans had developed. Working together, they began incorporating this biological technology into the construction project. But not everything went smoothly. 1 month into construction, a massive solar flare from the dying star destroyed 3 collector panels. The Galactic Council observers were quick to point out the inevitable failure of the project. "These humans," one observer commented loudly during an inspection, "they don't understand that some species are simply destined to fade away." Stone was about to respond when Elder Root stepped forward. The Moss person's usually gentle movements were now firm and determined. "We have survived centuries of darkness," Elder Root said, his bioluminescent eyes bright. "We have adapted and evolved while you claimed we were stagnant. Now we work with humans not because we are weak, but because they alone saw our strength." The observer fell silent, taken aback by the usually peaceful being's strong words. The project pressed on. Human engineers worked day and night, incorporating Moss People biotechnology into their designs. The new collectors weren't just mechanical, they were partially alive, using engineered plants based on Moss People biology to capture and process light more efficiently than pure technology ever could. "They called this a waste of resources," Stone said during a progress meeting. "But look at what we've learned." He displayed images of the new hybrid technology already being adapted for human colony ships and space stations. The Moss People's knowledge of biological engineering was revolutionizing human technology. Their living architecture was being studied for space habitats. Their light processing abilities were improving solar power collection across human space. But the greatest challenge came 3 months into the project. The star's condition worsened suddenly, sending out waves of radiation that threatened both the construction teams and the planet below. The Galactic Council ships quickly retreated to a safe distance. They expected the humans to do the same. Instead, they watched in surprise as the human ships moved closer to the dying star. "All ships, deploy radiation shields," Stone ordered. "We're not going anywhere." What happened next amazed even the Council observers. The Moss People, using their biological technology, created special radiation-absorbing barriers that they grew around the human ships. Working together, humans and Moss People stood their ground against the star's fury. Hours later, when the radiation storm passed, the project hadn't lost a single ship or worker. The Council observers were silent as they watched humans, and Moss People immediately returned to work, stronger than ever. Stone smiled as he looked at the construction progress. The collectors were nearly 20% complete and ahead of schedule. Soon, the dying world would have the light it needed not just to survive, but to thrive. "Let them watch," he thought. "Let them see what happens when you don't abandon those in need." 6 months into the project, something unexpected happened in Lab Station 7, orbiting the Moss People's world. Dr. Thompson stared at her test results in amazement, then looked at Elder Bloom, who was gently swaying with excitement. "This can't be right," she said, running the test again. "The efficiency is over 300% better than our best solar panels." The experiment before them was deceptively simple, a combination of human solar technology and Moss People biological engineering. What they had created was something entirely new, living solar cells that could not only capture light, but actually amplify it. Our ancestors always dreamed of this, Elder Bloom said, his bioluminescent eyes glowing brightly. But we never had the mechanical knowledge to make it work. We needed human technology to complete the circuit, so to speak. Word of the breakthrough spread quickly. Soon, scientists from other human colonies were arriving to study the new technology. Even some of the younger species in the galaxy, those who hadn't yet earned the Galactic Council's full recognition, began sending observers. In the main construction yard, Commander Stone was implementing the new discovery. Replace the standard collectors on Section 8 with the new hybrid panels, he ordered. Let's see what these can really do. The results exceeded everyone's expectations. The new living solar collectors weren't just more efficient. They could repair themselves, grow to replace damaged sections, and adjust their properties to match changing light conditions. But the innovations didn't stop there. The Moss people's knowledge of biological engineering, combined with human industrial capability, led to breakthrough after breakthrough. In one of the surface laboratories, human botanists worked with Moss people scientists to develop new forms of agriculture. They created plants that could grow in almost complete darkness, using the smallest traces of light and minerals to produce food. Think about what this means for deep space colonies, Dr. Thompson explained to a group of visiting scientists. We could grow food anywhere, even on ships during long-range missions. The Moss people's living architecture also proved revolutionary. Their cities weren't just alive. They were intelligent, responding to the needs of their inhabitants. Human engineers began adapting these principles for their own colony designs. Imagine space stations that can heal themselves, one engineer said during a presentation. Habitats that grow and adapt to their colonists' needs. Even the Galactic Council observers couldn't ignore the results anymore. They watched as ships from various young species arrived, seeking to learn from this unexpected partnership between humans and the supposedly stagnant Moss people. Elder Root spent more time in the orbital stations now, teaching other species about their biological technology. For centuries, we focused on surviving, he told his students. Now, with human help, we can share what we learned during those dark years. One day, a message arrived from a distant human colony facing its own environmental crisis. They wanted to know if the new hybrid technology could help them survive on their harsh world. Dr. Thompson looked at Elder Bloom. What do you think? Should we show them what we can do together? The Moss person's response was immediate. We remember what it's like to face extinction alone. We will help. Teams of human and Moss people scientists began traveling to other worlds, sharing their innovations. The supposedly weak species that the galaxy had abandoned was now helping others survive and thrive in conditions once thought impossible. In orbit, the massive solar collection system was nearing completion, its panels now enhanced with the new hybrid technology. But it had become more than just a project to save one species. It was proof of what could happen when different civilizations worked together, combining their strengths instead of judging each other's weaknesses. You know what the best part is? Dr. Thompson said to Commander Stone as they watched another ship arrive with young scientists eager to learn. The Galactic Council said the Moss people weren't worth saving because they couldn't adapt. But look at how much the galaxy has changed because we proved them wrong. Stone smiled. The project to save a dying world had become something much bigger. It had become a beacon of innovation for all the species the galaxy had overlooked. 1 year after the project began, the Galactic Council could no longer ignore what was happening in the once-forgotten solar system. The Council's Grand Chamber, usually reserved for the most advanced species, now held an unusual meeting. Humans and Moss people stood together before the Council, ready to present their results. High Counselor Dawn, Earth's representative, stood beside Elder Root as they faced the assembled leaders of the galaxy's most powerful civilizations. The chamber's massive screens showed live images of the transformed system. What you call the dying world? Dawn began, her voice clear and strong. has become the fastest-growing center of biological research in this sector of space. The images showed the Moss People's planet, now bathed in carefully controlled light from the massive solar collection system. The surface glowed with healthy colors, and new cities grew beneath the artificial day. More importantly, Elder Root added, his bioluminescent eyes bright with pride, "We are producing new technologies that benefit all species." He gestured, and the screens changed to show the innovations developed over the past year. The council members shifted uncomfortably in their seats as they saw the evidence. Ships from 30 different species now orbited the Moss People's world, their crews learning the new hybrid technologies. The living solar collectors were being installed on space stations across the galaxy. The biological engineering techniques were transforming hostile worlds into habitable ones. "This is most unexpected," the council leader admitted, studying the data. "We had not foreseen such developments." "Because you chose not to look," Dawn replied firmly. "You saw a species that was different from you, and you decided their path of evolution was wrong." Elder Root moved forward, his usually gentle movements now purposeful and proud. "We did not need to be saved," he announced. "We needed partners who could see our strength. The humans didn't rescue us. They helped us show the galaxy what we could do." The evidence was undeniable. The system that had been written off as a lost cause was now producing technological advances that the Council's best scientists were scrambling to understand. The combination of Moss People biological knowledge and human innovation had created something entirely new. In the space around the planet, construction ships were now building something else, the first Moss People space station. It wasn't made of metal and plastic like other stations. Instead, it grew like a living thing, using the hybrid technology they had developed. "Our first colony ship will launch next month," Elder Root announced to the stunned council. "Not because we need to leave our world anymore, but because we choose to explore. The humans have shown us that the stars are not just lights to sustain us, they are places to discover." The council chambers erupted in discussion. Some members argued that this success was a fluke, but others saw the potential. The younger species in the gallery watched with hope. If the Moss People could rise from abandonment to this level of achievement, what else was possible? Commander Stone, standing at the back of the chamber, smiled as he remembered the doubts they had faced at the beginning. Now, the same council that had abandoned the Moss People was debating how to establish better relations with them. The final vindication came when a group of council scientists presented their analysis. The hybrid technologies developed by humans and Moss People were more advanced in some areas than the council's own capabilities. The living architecture, self-repairing ships, and biological power systems were revolutionizing space travel and colonization. "We may have been wrong," the council leader finally admitted. "Perhaps it is time to reconsider how we judge the potential of different species." As Dawn and Elder Root left the chamber after the session, they found a crowd of representatives from other overlooked species waiting to speak with them. Each had their own stories of being judged as too different, too specialized, or too primitive. "We will help them too," Elder Root said to Dawn. "After all, that is what partners do." The galaxy was changing. The species that had been left behind were finding their voice, and at the center of it all was the unexpected partnership between humans and the Moss People, proof that no species was truly without potential. 5 years after the first contact between humans and Moss People, their solar system had become unrecognizable. The dying red star still burned weakly, but its light was now caught and amplified by a vast network of living solar collectors, turning the once dark world below into a thriving garden. Admiral Grace Wilson stood on the observation deck of Unity Station, the massive living space station that orbited the Moss People's homeworld. Beside her, Elder Root watched ships coming and going through the bustling space lanes. "Hard to believe this was once a forgotten system," Wilson said, watching a group of young Moss People boarding their newest colony ship. The vessel was unlike anything the galaxy had seen before, a living ship that grew and healed itself, powered by hybrid solar technology. Today we launch our third colony, Elder Root said proudly. But more importantly, look who goes with them. The loading bay below was filled with a mix of species. Humans worked alongside moss people, while representatives from a dozen other lesser species learned from both. The galaxy's overlooked civilizations had found their way to this system, drawn by the promise of partnership rather than judgment. Dr. Thompson, now the head of the Joint Species Research Institute, hurried up to them with exciting news. The tests on the new deep space habitats are complete, she announced. The living hull design works even better than we hoped. Ships can now travel twice as far without stopping for repairs. The advance of technology hadn't slowed in the past 5 years. Each combination of human innovation and moss people biological engineering led to new discoveries. Their living ships could survive in conditions that would destroy conventional vessels. Their hybrid power systems were revolutionizing space travel. But the biggest change wasn't in technology. It was in how the galaxy's species interacted with each other. In one of the station's many research labs, scientists from 20 different species worked together, each bringing their own unique perspectives and abilities. The Galactic Council's latest assessment just arrived, Officer Tom reported, bringing up a holographic display. They've officially recognized 6 more species as advanced civilizations this year alone. The Council had been forced to change its ways. The success of the human-moss people partnership had proven that progress didn't always follow a single path. Species that had been dismissed as too specialized or primitive were now being reevaluated. In the station's botanical garden, Elder Bloom taught a class of mixed-species students. Every life form has something to teach us, he explained, demonstrating how to grow living computer circuits. The key is to look for strength in our differences. Commander Stone, now overseeing the expansion of the solar collection system, received regular requests from other systems wanting to adapt the technology. Remember when they called this project a waste of resources? He asked Wilson with a smile. The investment had paid off many times over. The hybrid technologies developed here had solved problems across human space and beyond. Harsh worlds were being made habitable. Space stations could repair themselves. Ships could travel further than ever before. But perhaps the most significant change was visible in the station's central plaza. Children from different species played together, none of them caring about who was advanced or primitive. To them, the idea that some species were worth less than others seemed ridiculous. "We're receiving another diplomatic request," Officer Tom announced. 3 more systems want to join the Alliance of Emerging Species. The alliance, formed by humans and moss people, had grown into a powerful force in galactic politics. It gave overlooked species a voice and supported their development without trying to force them into a single mold of civilization. As the day ended, Wilson and Elder Root watched the sun set through the station's living windows. The solar collectors turned the weak red light into a beautiful display of colors. "You know what the Galactic Council got wrong?" Wilson asked. "They thought being different was a weakness, but our differences are what made all of this possible." Elder Root's bioluminescent eyes glowed warmly. And so the species they left behind found their own path to the stars. Below them, the once dying world shone with new life, a beacon of hope for all those who had ever been told they weren't good enough. The galaxy was changing, one partnership at a time, proving that no species was truly weak when they stood together.